All right, welcome back. It is day number 4 out of the 1,260 days of prophecy. That's my story. I'm sticking to it until I know better. Or you could just go day number 4 of Trump's administration. They line up.
Shalom, shalom, Kodashim. What's happening? How you
Shalom,
doing today?
shalom. I'm good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was.
four
It's funny
days
when I
in,
was
the world
when I was
hasn't
typing
exploded.
out that when I was typing out that 4 out of 1,260. It turns out that's a really long time. Like 1,000, when you think of the number, you're like, that's going to go by in no time at all. It's like I get the feeling that it's like only a year, but that's like 3.5 years.
Yeah,
It's a really long time. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can do the show every day for 3.5 years. Gonna have to take some breaks. We'll see. We'll see how it
got
goes.
to do it. I don't know about you or anybody else, but man, who else is excited for Warp Speed 2.0?
Oh God, no. It isn't so.
It's the Stargate, right? The Stargate program. You heard about that?
Oh, is that what you're?
Star-
I thought you were talking about Operation Warp Speed, where they had the emergency use authorization for
well, that
the
was
Ford.
the first one, and so I joke about 2.0 because just what he did, what President Trump did with the, I guess they signed a thing, an executive order to build
Yeah,
that infrastructure for AI here, and that's one of the things I was watching the when is it Larry Ellis was talking. It's got the owner of Oracle, big investor. He was just like, just the
Larry
advancements
Ellis.
we're going to have
Yeah,
in vaccine technologies, and so I was like, oh great, here we go again.
yeah.
And I
You
think
know, it's
Trump's
funny on
still on
this.
the Trump. He's still the father of the vaccine. He's still proud of
Yeah,
that.
I have a feeling that there's some ignorance involved in this because he was mentioning when he was signing the executive order for JFK to release those files. Somebody had asked him, "Are you aware that of the conflict between Elon Musk and Sam Altman?" And he said something along the lines of, yes, they don't get along. He goes, but there's people I don't get along with. You still got to do business. So
Yeah,
it's like I don't think he's. I get the feeling that it's kind of like a repeat of like when he was the 45th president and he's going in a little ignorant and had to trust people who turned out he should have never trusted, like Fauci. He's in the news today, so I kind of get that sense of like maybe you should spend some time and learn why Elon doesn't like Sam Altman. The dude is a liar.
yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of keep my eye out for when Elon and Trump kind of butt heads. I've
Yeah.
yet to see that. I'm sure that's down the road.
It happened pretty early in the first administration because if I don't know if you remember, Elon was part of the first administration as an advisor, and he bounced out pretty quick.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't aware of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, he bounced out within a month or two. Probably just too much drama, too much. I don't know what the reason is. It was so long ago, but I kind of get that same sense. We'll see how it goes this time around. My understanding is he's getting pretty buddy with him. Like he's rented one of the cottages at Mar-a-Lago so that he can be there with Trump to negotiate the Doge stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. You get two alphas going head to head. Sometimes there's a collision.
yeah,
They have
yeah,
different ideas, especially I think Elon's more green, as it were, in some respects, and Trump is more oil, old school oil and stuff. But I think it could be
yeah.
complementary. I think you got to have both. So
I hope that Trump listens to Elon because Elon has been sounding the alarm on AI for a very long time, 20 years. Like before AI even really was a thing. Elon was talking about how dangerous it is, and now that it's actually a thing, I can understand his points on how dangerous it is. And I think most people assume that it's dangerous because it's going to take on a life of its own. That's not actually the danger. The danger is misinformation. It's like the woke mind virus 2.0. So like you had said, warp speed 2.0, it's like that because if you get this point of truth, this thing that people think of as like a point of truth, and it starts manipulating things, it's going to get to a point to where we don't even have a chance against this. Like if it starts lying and changing history and giving misinformation, there's there's going to be 50, 500 genders. that that everyone's going to be like, well, I googled it, it said there's 500 genders.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean that's a good point because we all do that today, and we kind of rely on things we get
Yep.
from Google or Wikipedia. Uh, I just released a video just now, just kind of looking at different words about Plato. The
Mm,
word Plato comes from, if you kind of rabbit hole and you start thinking about these words Plato, but you end up with like plateau, everything that's flat
mm,
and it's a plane and it's like a play on words and like a plate or a plot map. Um, so there's just these different ideas with Plato and what he's associated with, and Pythagoras, who brought forth the sphere and the ball and stuff. And you think of the Python spirit that Paul had to deal with, and there's just a lot of hidden stuff. And I'm like, man, there's a lot of the simulacrums winking here at us with some of these words and how how our
yeah.
history is changing. And it's like his story changes, and it's a big deal to have accurate information of the past and stuff, because
Yeah.
that's me personally. I think that's part of the 1,000 years of Satan's deception. We discussed this a little bit just on how I think a lot of our past, we've had not necessarily that we're going to be deceived for 1,000 years, but we've had 1,000 years of deception, maybe missing from our timeline, missing
Yeah.
from our understanding of what has taken place in the past. And I think that's pretty obvious too when you look at the pyramids and you look at all of these megalithic structures and stuff like that, that people are just scratching their heads, going, where'd this come from? Like the
Yeah.
other
How
day,
they do that.
I was watching a video. It was I think they were in India or something, but they had carved out into granite, and it was like they had like a smoothness test meter, and they were testing like the smoothness that they carved out in these rocks. And it was just a big huge room, about 20 foot long, maybe 10-15 foot wide, with a big arch. And it was like a prayer room or some kind of sacrificial, who knows what. But they said like the granite was almost just as smooth as glass when they put the
Hmm.
smooth meter. And it's like you can't even really get that with modern day tools. So it's like how they how are these things done? And so I think that's kind of something that's a gap in our consciousness as humanity, is what has happened in the past. And I think that's a threat we have with AI for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's Elon's argument is if you're going to allow this thing to be publicly available, if you're going to allow this to be a thing, it has to be ruthlessly truthful. And that's what he had hoped for with OpenAI is that it would be open source so anybody could audit it. Everything would be out in the open so people could identify, wait a minute, you're making this do the XYZ. And they've done the complete opposite. They've closed sourced it, they're for profit, which forced him to open XAI. I know a lot of people look at him of like, look, he's the Antichrist because he's building AI. Well, no, he's doing it because there's just no other choice. And I have a feeling a lot of that has to do with Donald Trump too. Is like the dude's like 70 some odd years old. Like, does he really care about AI? But the fact that it's becoming a huge thing that if we don't, it would be like not building nuclear bombs. It's just like China, Russia, everybody's building massive AI infrastructures. If we don't keep up, we're in danger of whatever consequences come from not keeping pace. So I kind of understand his position. But I like Elon's perspective to where if you're going to do this, you have to be ruthlessly truthful. He actually just announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that part of the training for Grok 3.0, which is their next iteration of Grok, they're putting all legal cases and documentation into the model so that you can actually start to like identify people who are like wrongfully accused. Maybe there's things that are missing, stuff like that. So there's an amazing upside. Like people who should have been prosecuted but weren't might get prosecuted now. People who weren't prosecuted or people who shouldn't have been prosecuted could go free. I mean, like, plus there's a massive amount that you can learn from having all of that information at your fingertips. So there's amazing benefits as long as it's not manipulated.
All right.
So it's going to be very interesting. But yeah, I do think it's definitely part. I know one of the big fears is Mark of the Beast stuff. People are like, Elon Musk is making the Neuralink and that's going to be able to control your brain. I, why? I don't think we actually need something to control your brain because words do a pretty damn good job of it. Like we're still dealing with people who are absolutely convinced about error. It's just like, when people are convinced about something, you don't need a piece of technology to reinforce that. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier about, the name Plato and just it's
hmm
through words, through, we talked about this before, casting spells, through spelling.
yep.
Each morning you wake like you're coming from the dead, right? And you wake up, you put on your wardrobe, like you're going to war, you're going off to work, right? So you work all week for the weekend because you're weakened, and it's these words have like meaning, when we
Yeah.
just kind of pigeonhole into stuff and talked about AI. I was looking a little bit into it. There's a biblical AI. There's which is spelled Ayin Yod, I believe, but also there's the
Mm.
Aleph Yod, A, like A. Um, but the beginning of Jezebel's name is Yetzabel, Aleph Yod. But when you start to dive into the Hebrew AI and getting into the words and the root of words, you just see that, just how I jokingly say the simulacrum, but just how, the creation is it's by his word, right? The foundations of the
hmm
earth were by his word. And I believe that everything stems and roots from that Hebrew idea and concepts of, we get a lot of these understanding. Last week you were talking about the pineal gland. So that's why
hmm
you see a lot of the um, these figures in antiquity with the pine cone, right? It's like opening up the mind, and you think about like, well, Pinocchio, right? Pinocchio, what happens? He gets a revelation. He gets his mind open, and there's that's also from the face of God, where Jacob Peniel, which means panim is the face, right? Faces.
hmm
It's the plural word of pan. So when we do like panoramic, we pan back and forth. It's in front of in the face. And so these words, like, just deep root it when you get into the Hebrew and you start to understand how these things are. And that's what my question is like, what is this AI all about? It's artificial and it's intelligence. And I thought it was kind of, it doesn't escape me that all this so-called technology came out at the same time to all these different people. So like that seems a
hmm
little suspect to me. It's like, how does everybody have, we got 10 different companies coming out with chat GPT or whatever and all these different AI stuff. It's like, that means that the military's probably had it for 20, 30 years already. And they've probably already been manipulating the populace through these tools. And so that just seems
Yeah.
to be a pattern. They'll have a new technology that comes out. It's like, well, yeah, the military has had that for many, many years now. And so we're just now getting to it in the public.
There's definitely a truth to that. In that, I mean, Boston Dynamics is an example of technology, and even the internet. They had the internet 30 years before the internet was even a thing. They had
Yeah.
interconnected services that can communicate over wires, and they had their computers connected to it. So yeah, there's definitely some technologies to where that is the case. However, I do believe that some people take it too far, and they just assume that everything that comes out, the government must have had before it actually came out. Which there's got to be some things that just kind of develop naturally on their own, because especially when you get these large companies. So I think it was actually Facebook that came out with the technology for artificial intelligence, because what they had started doing, and it's possible the government had something like this, but to the best of my knowledge, Facebook was kind of the first one to really start propagating this to where it's, if you go back to when it started to become popular, you can see like the illustrations that they would give, or to where it'd be like it just looks like a tree with like all these little branches and stuff like that. That to where when they're training these AI models, it's really they're just breaking down information and making these connections, these associations, so that when you present an algorithm with a token, it can actually predict what the next thing should be. So that's like there's a lot of stuff, and I don't know how that would go down if like maybe the government had artificial intelligence and they gave it to Facebook, because that's a possibility, or if it just developed naturally. But you're right, it's just like it's really interesting how this stuff just kind of started to explode, like all at the same time, to where it's just like once it's out there, so many different things start to develop simultaneously. It's like why wasn't it Google the first one to actually do this? Why? Because
Right.
you know, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's like the same thing with the Maxines, right? It's like how do they all have this technology all of a sudden?
Hmm.
Like so somebody's distributing to these large corporations, like they were all working at it simultaneously, and then all of a sudden the market's flooded with this new technology. Typically, whenever you invent something, if you're a company or an organization that especially has shareholders, whatever, if you come up with a new technology, it's proprietary. It's not something that just everybody's going to have all at once,
Yeah.
And so I just think that's kind of interesting to seeing that pattern and whenever something like this is just kind of released onto the populace, it's suspect to say the least.
I think there could be a spiritual element to it too, because like if you look at like the light bulb and like really early inventions, there's several of those that happened at the same time, to where they were like occurring. The discoveries were so close together that sometimes they have a challenge on attributing who did it first.
Right.
I almost wonder if it's not like spiritual, to where God just allows certain things or encourages or pushes people into, okay, now it's time for this next level of discovery and evolution, if you will, the industrial age. I almost wonder if there's not a
Enlightenment.
degree of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be the case.
Cool. All right. What else you want to talk about? What else is going on? They announced yesterday, I think it was, there was it a senator who or a congressman who submitted a new amendment to allow 3 terms.
Yeah. Not a fan.
Me neither.
Not a fan.
No, I like the
Because
two. Could you imagine if Biden had 3 terms?
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because that's all that's going to happen is someone else will
Yeah,
get the throne for 12 years, and you'll be like, you won't be
that's
able to
just
get
too
rid of them.
long.
But
I,
I
and
get it. I get it too. Like it's I think maybe we discussed that the other night. It's like you do 4 years. We were sitting there watching Biden, and as Trump was coming in, it's like just imagining all the hard work you put in for 4 years, and then the next person comes in and just wipes it out. So
done.
I can understand like maybe making one term like 6 years or something. Give time
That's all right.
for things to develop and progress, but 4 years
That,
sometimes. I know from working in corporate businesses, you got a big ship. It takes a long time for things to move, and it's like sometimes when one president puts in a policy and then the next president comes in, that policy that he put in is just now taking effect for the person who's now at the helm, and he's possibly
yeah.
taking credit for something some other president did. So
Well, yeah, and it's like in a typical term, it's like your first year. Um, is if you haven't been in the office before, it's a learning process. It's like the
right,
training year, and then the last year, your attention is focused on getting another term. So really, they only have like 2 years where they're effective.
right,
It's not until their second term that they're actually highly effective, and I think we can see that with Trump, how he hit the ground running with several hundred executive orders that they're just putting into place. They're getting all the positions filled so that they can get as much done in his 4 terms as possible. But he's too old. I know the guy who, my understanding from what little that I read about it is they want him. They're like he should be able to have a third term based on what happened to him because he didn't really get a good opportunity to do all the things that he wanted to get done. So I can kind of understand from that perspective, but I don't think he would even run even if it was an option. The dude's getting too old.
right.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can see it from that light. Like, I think they would have to prove that in a court of law that, I mean, to most of us, everything is obvious of what happened and what took place. But I think to give it credence, that would help to, prove it in the court of law and have people go down for like, you know,
yeah.
manipulating the results. And so I think that could maybe justify. But yeah, like he's going to be how old by the time? How old is he? He's like 78 now, so he'd be 82. Is
Yeah.
he 78?
Uh,
Yeah, I can't even imagine like being that age trying to
he's
go through
78
all
years old.
78. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that would be 86 by the time he he completed his. So, yeah, I mean, even like from the Bible's perspective, they put term limits on the priest. Like, you're not supposed to be so old, and I think people have ignored that, and you get these lifetime career politicians that are in the system, and they're like our priest in a sense. They're officiating, they're officials for the laws and stuff, and so
Yeah.
um, they get
A
in
lot of
there, they get too long, and
Yeah, a lot of times they're just filling a seat so that they can vote the way of their party. They don't actually do any good in office.
yeah,
They're just like you're just put your X here.
still in the box. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm not sure of the legal standing of would that take an act of Congress, or that's got to go before the Supreme Court to change that.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know the details. It came across my feed. I know that it was actually submitted, and so they're actually pushing for it. They're actually going to try and get it, but I don't really have a lot of the details what
Yeah.
it would take.
Well, it makes me think of It's kind of like I was listening to somebody earlier about the 14th Amendment, about him trying to get rid of the um, birth
Or,
being birthright citizenship here in the United States, and apparently, the United Kingdom and Australia, that they've already done this. They've already gotten rid
Mhm.
of this, and so like we know from the front, like, oh well, it's never gonna get anywhere. But the idea is really just to push it up to the Supreme Court and let them make that
Mhm.
decision. And just because all like most laws, they're intentionally left ambiguous, and there's the argument that the originist of this is just like the Torah. We talk about the law, this and that, and it's kind of like it's about the intent. And
Mhm.
so the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution and stuff, they had, when they were writing these things, they had intent. And so if you have got a Supreme Court that has that are originalists, that believe in the original intent, and then they try to take the intent over and transfer that into today, so you can say, well, they intended it for this purpose, but now things have changed. But we
Right.
don't get rid of the intent, we don't get rid of the law that was back then, but we just understand it in the framework. And then there's those people who like, oh well, we make it say what it means today, and it's like, no, we need to go back to what the original intent was, and that's the spirit of the law, the
Yeah.
spirit of the Torah, so to speak. And so it's
Yeah.
going back to that original intent, and they left that kind of ambiguous because at that time, they needed to populate, they needed to have these certain restrictions and certain laws and amendments. It's an amendment anyway. The 14th Amendment, it's not, it can be amended, right? So they have these ideas and thoughts of how things were intended to be, and so we need to look at our Constitution in that view, not from today's view, and then try to change it based upon what you know the current mob rule is.
Yeah, I heard a rabbi actually. I saw a YouTube video of a Christian guy talking to a rabbi about Jesus, and it came up in their conversation that the reason behind the Talmud is for what you just explained, to where you can, just from reading like the Torah, you don't always understand the intent behind it. And the idea behind the Talmud was to be able to further expound upon the intent. And it's just been this growing document over time. And with all things that man makes, it gets abused. So,
Right.
there's a lot of stuff in there that probably is, just a bunch of bullshit. And I think that's kind of the thing with the birthright citizenship, is just like the intent was good, a path to citizenship, but as with all things, men tend to abuse it, and that's what they're trying to fix, is the cases of abuse, and they need to get that sorted out. So,
Right. Well, I mean, that's to your point. That's what the Talmud is. Talmud. You think of the word Talmudim, which is disciples in Hebrew, and
mhm.
so Talmud is the walk, halak, the way to walk, and so, but it's case law. So people have an issue that comes up. It's not specifically written in the Torah, but the spirit or the heart, the intent of it still remains. And so you make judgments based upon righteous decisions and stuff. And so, but yeah, like you said, it's like the Pharisees, they add all these different things onto the law, and then they keep this burden on people, but they don't keep it themselves, and so they become hypocrites in that sense. And so,
Yeah.
but the Talmud was case law, and so whenever you read something in the Torah, like, well, what do we do? Like, well, this instance happened way back here from Rabbi so and so. Let's look it up, and so that's kind of what the Talmud is. And obviously, there's some stuff in there that's kind of like, but it could be, from the perspective. I know a lot of people will take stuff out of context, and like, no, that was just an argument in a case that they were trying to hash out that somebody brought forth. And so it's just like going to court, just like
Yeah.
our system pretty much. So
I have a feeling that we're going to be dealing with this for all eternity. I'm reminded of him ruling with a rod of iron. Clearly, that's the Torah in my mind. Is we're there's if life is anything comparable to what it is now throughout eternity, we're gonna have conflicts with one another. Somebody's gonna be upset because you smashed my car. What do we do? How do you repay me?
right.
If we have
Well,
cars.
that's why I say, like, the Torah, it is old, right? That to
Hmm.
to say it's not the Old Testament, I mean, it's old, it's archaic in some sense, but like you said, we keep the intent of it,
Hmm.
its purpose. Like, we don't live in an agrarian lifestyle like they used to back then. So there's things that are written that aren't written to us specifically because I don't own a donkey. But if you come over and kill my donkey, or crash into my car, I can take the intent of how they handled
Hmm.
that and compare that. And so that's kind of the heart behind it. And to your
Yeah.
point, yeah, it's like, he says he's the lawgiver, right? And he's the Messiah, and he's the king and the righteous judge. And it's like, well, how is he going to rule his kingdom? By his law, eternal laws. They are a
Yeah.
light and a lamp unto our feet. And so that's how the kingdom is ruled. And we've become part of the commonwealth, the citizenship of Israel. And so, just like we want people coming into our country to obey our laws and get to learn the language and the culture, we should do the same for the Holy Script.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
To me, that's far more exciting than like this religious idea of floating on clouds and strumming a harp. Like, how boring would that be? I mean, like, life is interesting. I don't, it's the triumph over hard things. It's discovering new things. It's solving a problem. That's what really makes life interesting. Like, if those things go away, what do you do? I mean, I've been self-employed almost my entire life, and I've literally taken a year off, and those were the worst times of my life. Like, there's nothing worse than just sitting around doing nothing. It's just
Right.
like I have to constantly do something. It's funny, the place that I currently work, my boss, he was asking me because I didn't take any time off during the holidays. He says, why didn't you take any time off during the holidays? I'm like, because I just get too bored. It's like I constantly need to be doing something. So like I totally get the idea of like the need for the law because as long as whatever form we're in, whether it's these bodies, new bodies, spirit bodies, I hope things still are comparable to what we've been trained with now, how we've been risen up now. I just hope all the bad stuff goes away. It's just like that and ego and pride and the murderous intent, those things.
Right.
If we don't have to deal with those, that's great. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get mad at your neighbor or have an argument with your wife. Well, which I don't think we'll have wives, but
Well, I mean, we're
hopefully it's not
gonna.
boring.
Yeah, I mean, will we still need porters in the new kingdom? Will we? I don't. It's
Yeah,
not like everybody's going to be just a priest sitting around, talking the word. I think there's
yeah,
there's still things that are taking place, and this is our training ground.
yeah,
What we've been given, and what we do with what we've been given. That's what we're. That's why we said last time. It's like, live in eternity right now. Act as if you've already got your new body and you're in the kingdom, and you're just doing what you would do if everything was complete, right?
yeah,
But so, yeah, to your point, it's like, we won't have this flesh, this mortal flesh. We'll be immortal. We'll have won't be as fallen. And but part of this, Yahuwah is training us to enter into that kingdom, to be, to live and walk righteously. And it's kind of, that's, you say we'll have the law, but you won't have the law. Like, there's not a need for law. That's what Paul
It'll be
talks
written on
about.
your heart. Yeah.
Right. It's the fruit of the spirit. Is like
Mhm.
where there's no law written against. If you're not doing anything that's violating, then there's really no need for it. And
Mhm.
so it's kind of like you're walking in the spirit of it,
Yeah.
not, offending people, not, lying, stealing, cheating. You won't, there's no need for any of that stuff because you're walking in that righteousness. But it's still, it's your schoolmaster. It teaches you how to do that, but you
Yeah.
don't just graduate college and then just get rid of everything you just learned. You apply it
Right.
throughout the rest of your life. So,
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a very good point. The law will be written on our heart.
yeah,
All
yes,
right.
man.
Next, did you get to see Trump's message to the World Economic Forum? That was amazing.
Yeah, you should play a clip. He's just too funny to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. Like, it's a little sad because I'm like, I want to be like us, buffoon. Just the way he sounds sometimes about, talking about, well, I won 7 states and I have the biggest win and this and that. And I'm just
Yeah.
thinking that from the seat of somebody who's in Europe, and like these bankers asking him these questions are like, what is he talking about? He's just rambling on. But he's always got to inflate himself just a little bit.
Yeah. Here we go.
Um,
Let me.
yeah, you should pull up the clip. He's just kind of, oh, I did so good. I'm so good.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's
Not a good Trump
do.
impression. Don't record that.
Yeah. I did really good. I can't do a Trump impression either. All right, here we go. I'm going to play the first part because the first part is so good.
Stronger, wealthier, and more united than ever before, and the entire planet will be more
Entire
peaceful and
planet.
prosperous as a result of this incredible momentum and what we're doing and going to do. My administration is acting with unprecedented speed to fix the disasters we've inherited from a totally inept group of people and to solve every single crisis facing our country. This begins with confronting the economic chaos caused by the failed policies of the last administration. Over the past 4 years, our government racked up $8 trillion in wasteful deficit spending and inflicted nation-wrecking energy restrictions, crippling regulations, and hidden taxes like never before. The result is the worst inflation crisis in modern history and sky-high interest rates for our citizens and even throughout the world. Food prices and the price of almost every other thing known to mankind went through the roof. President Biden totally lost control of what was going on in our country, but in particular with our high inflation economy and at our border. Because of these ruinous policies.
I don't agree with that approach. Attacking our own president,
Yeah.
our previous president. You got to rise above that. You have to, he's crapping on America in a sense, which I get it. Maybe talking to his people or whatever, but to be the representative of the United States, I just think there's a better way that could have been presented. Of course, I'm a critic or whatever, but
did you see my video yesterday on Trump rebukes the WEF?
No, I didn't see it.
I look at it as reproof. Did you? So this just here. I don't know if you saw this either. So I can't believe this happened. This is amazing to me.
I saw him smack down Bank of America.
Did you see this? He posted this on Truth Social. Like the day that this was 2 days ago. So I think it was the day that I'll have to check. I don't know if it was before he talked to the WEF or if it was the day he talked to the WEF. But yesterday I did a video again on Ezra, the lion rebuking the eagle. And it was just like, is that what did I really nail the prophecy? I mean, like, are we literally seeing the prophecy of Ezra like come to pass? Because it's just like, I can't make this stuff up. Trump literally posted this, him next to a lion. Then he's like rebuking the World Economic Forum. And it just happens to line up with like this prophecy of the lion rebuking the eagle. I don't know. So
he's smacking the kings down.
Oh, I didn't add here's the photo. Did you see this? Yeah, he literally posted that 2 days ago
Oh,
on
yeah.
his Truth Social.
Huh.
I don't know. Maybe he watches the show, and maybe he's just kind of
He's a
like,
show
"Ah,
watcher. Yeah.
this guy gets it. Yeah, Trump's watching the show. This guy gets it."
Or is that like
Oh,
symbolic for Judah being behind him? He's got his
maybe.
back.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Here, I can. For those who don't know what I'm
He
talking
didn't, so
about,
there was no context to it.
to the here, let's go look. So nope, he just
To
posted
the
the photo.
image.
Here's the photo.
Picture.
Yeah, Donald J. Trump 2 days ago just posted that photo. So I don't know. Maybe it's evidence of this lion here. So this is Ezra 12, also known as Second Ezra 12. So it's chapter 12, and it's down here.
Verse 1 talks about the lion.
Yeah, while the lion was saying these words to the eagle, I looked, and it goes into a bunch of stuff about the eagle, and then gets down here to, when is it? I think it's 29, maybe.
31, 29.
And as for the lion whom you saw rousing up out of the forests and roaring and speaking to the eagle and reproving him for his unrighteousness and for all his words that you have heard, this is the Messiah, which I know people are going to freak out that I've read the word Messiah here. It just means anointed. I'm not trying to call Trump Jesus in any way, shape, or form. This is the anointed who the Most High has kept until the end of days, who will arise from the posterity of David and will come and speak to them. He will denounce them for their ungodliness and for their wickedness, and will cast up before them their contemptuous dealings. For first he will set them living before his judgment seat, and when he has reproved them, then he will destroy them. So I don't know if that's for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. But yeah, so this is what I did my video on yesterday, and I didn't even know he posted that picture of that lion when I did that video. So that's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So I don't know. Could be a fulfillment of Ezra, could just be a coincidence. Time will tell.
Well, they say a coincidence is something that coincides.
I love your words. I love your word association. But yeah, no, that was good. I mean, normally you're absolutely right. From a biblical perspective, you don't want to be bad mouthing your leadership. So, I mean, the scripture says, "Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give an account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you." That's what the scripture says. So it's like you're supposed to pray for your leadership. You're supposed to speak, well of them. But there has to be an occasion for bad leaders when it's time to reprove them and rebuke them. Maybe it's from one leader to another. So maybe there's an occasion for him to rebuke the Biden administration. But I get your point about, like, on average, it's not good to get into the habit of bad mouthing your leadership. It's just they're responsible for the things they do. So even if it comes down to an accountability on who's responsible for what happens. Like, you don't want to put yourself in a bad position to where you're subject to consequences just because they were doing stupid things. If you're doing your best to, behave in a godly manner, you're absolved of responsibility, but you can still speak positively of your leadership. So that's how I understand that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not known for his tact. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think it's just, it didn't need to be said to that group, but I get him like smacking them down and like not contributing as far as like NATO and, all the, reproving them in that respect. But it's just kind of to crap on your own country, essentially.
Yeah.
It just, whatever, each his own, but not the way I do it. But it's not the way I'm doing it, so I'm not there. It's easy to sit here on the sidelines.
So one of the other things that Trump has done, which is questionable, is he wants to make the United States the crypto capital of the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I looked into crypto and I'm like, I don't understand it, so I'm not gonna go all in on it. To me, I'm, I like to invest, sure, but I want something tangible, Mike. So what am I actually investing in? And I like this kind of ties into, I think he did an executive order for what is it, the CBDC, to where they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to have that kind of currency. And so I like the prospect and idea of having, to me though, it just seems like a different form of Tinder. And so that's people have been arrested for making different kinds of dollar bills and stuff, from in the past. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you make your own currency in a sense. And so that's what it feels like to me. And so I'm kind of elusive to it. I don't fully get it as far as, I mean, I understand like the principle of having the code and stuff like that, but I don't know, it just seems kind of strange, but it seems to be something that's big. I don't know how it's I hate to say something like this, how about how it can be regulated, you know, and maybe
I
that's the
can
point. But that's
I can
yeah,
con- I can
maybe
yeah, I can give you some insight into that. So cryptocurrency, all it is a ledger, right? So it's just like you have a checkbook, you write, when you deposit $100, and then when you've written a check for $10 in that ledger, you put, I wrote a check to Greg for $10, and now you have $90. That's a ledger. That's what cryptocurrency is. It's literally just a distributed ledger that everybody contributes to. And it's got math involved in order to verify that ledger so that it can't be manipulated. Because the only way to add to the ledger is to calculate the security based on what's happened before in the past. So it's like this growing chain. That's why it's called the blockchain. So every new chain that you add is a product of a previous one. So it can't be manipulated. So I understand the benefit. I understand the idea behind it, because the current banking system is just computers with a database, right? So somebody can go into the database and make a change. Or if there's a bug in the code somewhere, and say you deposit $1,000 into your account, but somebody doesn't realize that there's two Gregs at the bank, then they put it into another Greg's account, where'd your money go, right?
right.
So there's
Well,
problems with the current system, and that's the
yeah, I
intent
mean, it's
behind
a
it.
fiat system anyway right now. I mean,
Yeah.
money's not really money anyway. It's just a note. It's just, it's not, which is a debt. Whenever
Hmm.
you have a dollar bill, you're holding debt in your hand, essentially.
Yeah. And so where it's dangerous is there's so much of it right now that it's completely unregulated. But they do have cryptocurrencies. It's called the ISO 2022. There's a set of cryptocurrencies that they've been developing and testing and proving and hardening and fixing since 2022, that they intend to replace the banking system with. And that's where these CBDCs come in. It's the Central Bank Digital Currencies. And there's like 8 of them. It's XRP, it's XLM, it's Solana. I think Bitcoin might be, if it's not in there, it might be making its way in there, stuff like that. So that's what it is. So the idea is eventually you'll have a global system that is a distributed public ledger that can't be manipulated. The problem is that's not what those ISO 2022 cryptocurrencies are designed as. So I learned about this because I developed, as soon as COVID hit in 2019, I started developing software on the XLM network. In fact, I started a business and we actually got a grant from XLM to build on their network. So one of the key features of XLM is what's called a trust line, to where when you make a digital coin, in order for me to send it to somebody, I have to trust that person and then allow them to hold my coin. And then you can only send that coin to other people that I trust. So they have a mechanism built within the cryptocurrency so that they can stop you from spending their coin. And that's where you get into the potential inclusion with the mark of the beast, to where without the mark you can't buy or sell. And that's why a lot of people are kind of freaking out over cryptocurrency as this part of the beast system, which I can understand that, because that's exactly what they're doing. But here's the question though, is they can do that now. I mean, like, one of the things that Trump was reproving the WEF on, it's like, to their face, the Bank of America, he's like, why are you not allowing conservatives to bank at your institution? So they're literally already trying to prevent people from buying and selling by just not allowing them at their banks. So
Yeah, I mean, people get all hyped up about, the New World Order. It's like, you're in the New World Order.
yeah,
It's already,
exactly. So
it's
you're in it.
done. Your dollar bill says New World Order on it.
Yep.
It's a done deal. And yeah, they can, that, I think that is the big concern, right? It's like, oh, I don't like what you said about so and so politician. I'm going to turn off your money, which they
Hmm.
can do. They do that now already. And it's like,
Yeah.
like I hear like people, you see a lot of these commercials, buy gold, gold this, gold that. And I'm like, our system used to be based on gold. And it's like, okay, now I've got this large block of gold. Now am I going to go to the grocery store and hand this block of gold over to get some eggs and milk?
Take a
And
little shaving off and weigh it here. This
yeah,
will
it's like,
equal my amount of my groceries. That'll never happen.
yeah. So it's the evolution of currency. It's like, what do you do? The beast system is the beast system. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can completely remove yourself off, bury yourself in a cave and be, self-sufficient. Let us know how that goes. People have tried it,
Mhm.
but we need each other, and that's just our current system. And it's like, what is that perfect system that's in place?
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of it. It's communal bartering is the
Hmm.
way to go. Grow your own stuff, produce your own products, and trade with people.
Yeah.
You know, get your own
I
land.
think the perfect system is, I mean, with everybody with a pure heart and intent, then, you just produce enough for yourself and extra, or you specialize in something and you do it with joy. And as long as your needs are taken care of, I don't know. That's a good question. Do you think that once the beast system is destroyed, that there will still be some kind of currency or monetization? I mean, will you still be able to build wealth, or will everybody just be equal?
Yeah, I mean,
Star Trek.
what do we imagine?
We're
We're
gonna
just
live
gonna
like
like
Star Trek.
snap our fingers and get whatever we want. It's gonna just
Yeah.
appear. Well, I think we were talking about the Torah earlier, and just that regards, kind of, you know, back in that agrarian Old Testament lifestyle, their a form of money was lambs and cattle, and so they were sacrifices. Whenever you committed an offense or whatever, you brought in a sacrifice. Today, when we committed an offense, we bring in dollar bills to be forgiven for our sin if I broke the law. And so back then, they were bringing in, and it was a sacrifice to have to take your cattle that was producing milk, or your lamb, that you would eat or whatever. So that's as a sacrifice. It's almost like you were paying for your sins to be forgiven, and
Yeah.
sin just means trespass, right? And so it's the same concept. We do that today, and it's like, if I violate the law and I'm fined a certain fine, and say the Messiah pays for that, I don't go back out and break the law.
Right.
I honor the law and recognize the sacrifice that was given in my stead. And so the same. Now, I'll ask you this question, talking about the Torah, and it does talk about. I have often have this question: would we have in that under the guise of a Torah, would we have freedom of speech?
Mm.
Because in the Torah, you're not supposed to speak against leadership. You're not supposed to mention the names of other gods. There's these certain things that's, and it's funny. I look at what I see out in the world. Like, if you look at a Christian pastor, you look at a Jewish rabbi, or Islamic cleric. If you read your Bible, which one of those three would actually look like somebody that you think about in the Bible?
I think about when Michael is arguing with Satan over Moses' body. He 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 was very careful in how he chose his words, and I can only imagine it's because there is still some kind of a legal system that can hold you accountable, and there's consequences for your actions. Do you know what I'm talking about? He said the Lord rebuke you, so that he didn't bring a railing accusation on himself. So I don't
Well,
know if that persists or if that changes. I believe the creator is the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow. So I can imagine that as far as like the law and the way things are, is they'll still continue as they are. That the creator is perfect. However, what seems to be different is now we have a mediator. So is that where Christ comes in, to where in the event you mess up and you say something you shouldn't have, now you have to go get your lawyer to mediate for you.
Right. Take it to the judge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of interesting when you think about just what even separation of church and state, and the Bible is, from what I can tell, a theocracy. There's not a separation, but maybe there is. I don't know. But it seems like, when you think about like the priests and stuff, they're the officials, they're the mayors, they are the governors of our communities, in a sense that, like, people bring their offerings, they bring their tithe, their tax. You have to, every year everybody's got to pay their taxes, and they're the ones that are responsible to officiate and distribute the money through the treasurers and through all these different types of figures within our system. I just see that in the Torah, just from a current day perspective. So I kind of wonder, like, should we have a church and state? And it's one of these things. It's if we had a righteous church or state, then it would be good. But that's the challenge, is like, if the state was righteous, then that would be the church. I mean,
Yeah.
from like what I say is, like, Israel, the body of judges or whatever, they were supposed to be righteous judges, and they controlled the state. But you had the officials below them and stuff, and so like
Yeah. I
the
don't think there'll be
so-called.
I think the only reason why there's a separation of church and state now is because of the differences of opinions, right? Who's right, who's wrong? There's 40,000 different, denominations of, the church, and they all believe something different. Nobody can agree on a damn thing. I have to, my hope is, and it's not really a hope because it's what the scripture says, is there's only going to be one belief when Christ comes back. When everything is settled, the truth is finally revealed, and there's not going to be like an opinion on things. It's like, no, this is how it is. This is the truth. So maybe there'll be less ambiguity, to where there won't be a need to separate church and state. It's just the way things are, because this is what is true and this is what is not true. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe judgment happens instantaneously. Like,
Yeah.
something happens, there's no need to go to the judge or to the court. It's like we'll both be like,
Yeah.
oh well, I know.
Yeah.
It's fun to think about those things.
Yeah. So should we take some questions from the commenters? What do you guys want to? You have any questions for us? You want to?
Yeah, who's got
us to talk about?
some questions going on here?
Let's see. People smell my food. The 1,200. So what is this? This is Deborah.
What's Deborah saying?
The 1,260 days are 42 months of the Great Tribulation. The tribulation does not even start until the Antichrist signs the covenant with many. See Daniel 9:27. So,
let's pull up Daniel 9:27. What does it say?
Yeah. I happen to have Daniel on this screen already. Where is it? Why is it not sharing? Oh, I'm going to add it. There you go. All right, Daniel 9. I just like to pull up the whole thing. We'll scroll down to 9:27. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolates. Let's read some context here. So this is Daniel. Okay, now while I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people, Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord, my God, for the holy mountain of my God, yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand the vision. So, one thing I want to say about Daniel is he lived 2,700 years ago. That's not an exact number. It's roughly the time, because I get that from where is it? It's from this. So in Daniel 2, he interpreted the dream, which was Nebuchadnezzar. So given we're in the year 2024, I add 2024 to about 600 years before Christ's, which I come to roughly about 2,700 years. So to give you an idea of how long ago this was, I was just thinking about this last night. So Daniel, I think he was about 2,700 years ago. So that was a long time ago. So it's interesting that he was given a vision of these things. So here we go. So 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, and again, Messiah here could be anointed, until the anointed, the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of war, desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the end of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wings of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So I think the prevailing teaching on this is that weeks here is referring to years. I don't have all this like ready at the top of my head, but it's 70 weeks is 70 jubilees. Is that correct? Something along those lines. So it's not 70 weeks as in like 7 days. Like in our mind, a week is 7 days. But the prevailing teaching is that this is a much longer period of time. I think it's 7 jubilees, which is like 490 years or something like that. Don't quote me on that. I don't have it at the top of my head.
I got a different take on this.
Yeah, I do too. I'm just trying to explain the prevailing understanding on it. So know therefore and so basically this is supposed to cover a period of time. I just don't remember what that period of time is. It's like 490 years or something like that. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So is this 1948 or is this another period of time? Is this the Messiah, Jesus, or is this just an anointed person?
Well, yeah, that's something to add to that is Cyrus was called Messiah.
Right.
And what did he do? He came in and he brought he established the Jews coming back to Jerusalem. And many years after this, and I believe this ties into, if you can pull this up, Second Maccabees, chapter 6.
I don't think there's Maccabees on here.
You might have to get a different.
Yeah,
I have it on my eSword. See if you've got something up there. But if you look into Maccabees, I believe this has been taken out of most of our Protestant Bibles. I believe it's still in the Catholic Bibles, but it's in the King James Apocrypha and a lot of the older Bibles and stuff. And the Messiah directly talks about.
It is. It's in the Good News translation. So what is it? Second Maccabees what?
Chapter 6. Messiah talks about him setting up the abomination that makes desolate. Read chapter 6, 1 through verses 6. I don't know.
Okay. Not long after that, the king sent an elderly Athenian to force the Jews to abandon their religion and the customs of their ancestors. He was also to defile their temple by dedicating it to the Olympian god Zeus. Is this right? The temple on Mount Gerizim was to be officially named Temple of Zeus, the god of hospitality, as the people who lived there had requested. The oppression was harsh and almost intolerable. Gentiles filled the temple with drinking parties and all sorts of immorality. They even had intercourse with prostitutes there. Forbidden objects were brought into the temple, and the altar was covered with detestable sacrifices prohibited by our law. It was impossible to observe the Sabbath, to celebrate any of the traditional festivals, or even so much as to admit being a Jew. How long do you want me to read?
You could keep going to keep reading the whole thing. That's fine.
Okay. Each month, when the king's birthday was celebrated, the Jews were compelled by brute force to eat the intestines of sacrificial animals. Isn't that a Scottish thing? What's the haggis? Isn't that haggis?
Bacchus. Is it Bacchus?
Bacchus.
Dionysus.
Then during this sounds more disgusting though, because like by brute force, if you're being forced to eat it, it probably wasn't prepared well.
Yeah, they were having the pig, making them eat pig.
Yep. Then during the festival in honor of the wine god Dionysus, they were required to wear ivy wreaths on their heads and march in procession. On the advice of Ptolemy, the neighboring Greek cities were also instructed to require Jews to eat the sacrifices. They were told to put to death every Jew who refused to adopt the Greek way of life. It was easy to see that hard times were ahead. For example, 2 women were arrested for having their babies circumcised. They were paraded around the city with their babies hung from their breasts. Oh my gosh. Then they were thrown down from the city wall. On another occasion, Philip was told that some Jews had gathered in a nearby cave to observe the Sabbath in secret. Philip attacked and burned them alive. They had such respect for the Sabbath that they would not fight to defend themselves. Wow. Keep going.
Well, man, I think that's good. Just the point. It talks about their making them eat pork, and that's kind of, when you talk about the Messiah, when he was talking about the abomination that makes desolation, he makes that reference, and this is kind of that abomination that makes desolate, right? They take Zeus and get rid of Yahuwah, and they place Zeus in the temple, in a sense, right? And so he's declaring himself as God in the temple, and they're forced to eat pork, which is considered unclean, unholy. It talks about in the book of Isaiah those people eating swine's flesh, and that they're not part of the kingdom and stuff. And so that's kind of like we see, you get your Christmas ham or your Easter ham and stuff. A lot of these traditions that are handed down to us are kind of, and like it says up there, it's like they had to adopt the Greek way of life. And that was something I had, that video I just did on the gates of hell and the synagogue of Satan, how they gave a seat in the Sanhedrin to Tiberius. And so Tiberius is, part of Rome, and you got Greek and Rome and all these, infiltrating at this time. And so I think that's kind of the illusion that the Messiah is making, is like, this is the abomination that makes desolate, referring to that. And he even talks about, in the context of Matthew 24, when the disciples, he says, see all these stones on the temple? They ask him 3 different questions. They say, when will these things be? And they're directly related to the collapse of the temple, not necessarily the end of the world. But if you read it in that context of the 2 to 3 questions that they ask, he's, saying these things will come to pass. It's like, pray that it's not on a Sabbath day, and pray that, when these things come to pass, it's going to be, pretty bad. And I think that's the context of the last temple being destroyed and stuff. So,
yeah,
it's interesting. In that version, they have Dionysus, and then the one I'm looking at, King James, it says Bacchus, and so it talks about them marching. So that's when you have the Ides of March, which is in to attribute to Bacchus, I believe. Isn't that right? Is that Bacchus, Ides of March? or is that in what's that in February down in Louisiana? They have Fat Tuesday, something like that. I think it's all tied to that. But it's debauchery and getting hammered and profaning the temple and stuff, and that's kind of from a spiritual perspective. It's get the believers to partake in these events and festivities and stuff. And so, point being is in relation to this Daniel, I kind of see that as Cyrus, the Messiah coming and bringing moving onto the stage, moving the people back into Jerusalem, and they start to rebuild the wall again, and they start to rebuild the temple again. And then by the time that Antiochus Epiphanes comes around, this it's kind of foreshadowing some of these things that are happening. And so but I think there's a lot more. This is definitely a good discussion on Daniel to go further.
So in regards to Deborah's question, she says that the 1,260 days doesn't start until the Antichrist signs the covenant with many. So to address your question, Deborah, you have to. So number one, who's the Antichrist in Daniel 9 here? So down here, 9:27. So in the context, after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. So the question we have to answer is this Yeshua? So that would place this period of time during when he was alive and when he was crucified, or is this Messiah just an anointed person? So could this be Donald Trump? Because one way I could see this being fulfilled is if we are on this timeline, if not trying to toot my own horn, but in the event that my data is correct, would that refer to when the two witnesses are dead? Because the two witnesses are anointed. So would that be that Messiah? So we have to answer that question. Or is this another Messiah? So that's the question we have to answer here. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So is this prince who is to come who you're referring to as the Antichrist? Because the word Antichrist isn't used here. And most people know I have an issue with using the word Antichrist like the word Kleenex because it's just terribly inaccurate. When you study the word Antichrist in the scripture, it's a spirit that causes people to deny God. It's only used in it's only used in 1st and 2nd John, and it's only used 5 times. And all the references are in reference to a spirit that causes people to deny God. It has different attributes. So I take issue with using the word Antichrist because it's just ambiguous. So I think this is what you're referring to, is the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. And this is what you're referring to, the desolations, to where is this a person who comes in like Cyrus and causes debauchery, lawlessness, breaking covenants, stuff like that? Then that prince who causes those things, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. So is that 1 week a week of years? Is that 7 years? I think that's the assumption. That's
we read there. So it says the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince who is to come. So Antiochus Epiphanes shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. So this could be not a literal water flood, but
right.
Until
like
the end of the war
flood
of desolations are determined, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall end the sacrifice and offering. And so that's kind of when you read the whole context of Maccabees and stuff, this is what's kind of taking place. So I just recommend, we don't have to belabor this here, but I recommend reading Maccabees to kind of get a full scope. And I kind of see a lot of this being fulfilled in that. But like you said, prophecy can be cyclical and, repeat itself.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. So the thing we have to determine is, has this already been fulfilled? Or does this apply to where we're living now? Because if it applies to where we're living now, I could make a case for Trump being the anointed one and, being cut off, but not for himself. Like if the beast rises up and kills the two witnesses, clearly it's not for himself. They've already tried to kill him like 10 times. 3 times are really prevalent, but there's been, other times that have been thwarted. Eventually they will succeed. So is that referring to that? or is it referring to somebody who's more like what you're referring to where, there is somebody who comes in who causes people to be lawless and to deny God? So those
Right.
are the questions we have to answer.
Well,
And
it's
I
kind
don't
of,
know. See, that's the thing is here is like I'm not going to stand up here and say I know for sure what this means. That's why I'm taking an observer's perspective. The best I can do is go, look, this is what's happening, and this is what it seems like it lines up with Scripture. So if indeed we are living in prophetic times, that's the best I can do.
right. Well, I mean, I think that's kind of, keeping in mind that the Bible is a spiritual book, and so
Hmm.
it's giving us spiritual insight, and it really does tie into, who in the faith or who has set themselves up in the temple of acting as if they're God and removing His laws. That's the spirit of Antichrist. And a
Hmm.
lot of that was done uh, within the Christian faith. They changed the identity, they turned him into a man, and then they put him in the temple as sitting on the throne, and did away with his laws. And so that's
Hmm.
kind of that spirit that reigns within. And I was reading Revelation earlier, just talking about the woman who sits on seven hills, the whore of Babylon or whatever, and it's Babylon. Peter refers to Rome as Babylon when he writes a letter to Rome, and it's like, that's Babylon, the seven mountains in Rome, and it's
Hmm.
it's that spiritual indoctrination that's been handed down to us and caused us to put the Zeus, the different deity in the temple. And but I think that's like the pattern that you see all throughout Scripture and history and stuff. So interesting,
Yeah,
definitely deserves
I'd
more
actually
study.
I brought that up in my video yesterday on with Trump potentially being the lion from Ezra. In for Ezra here, actually, I'll just go read it to you guys since you brought this up
And I
about
saw that
Rome being
comment.
in the mountains.
Maccabees it's more of a history, not necessarily considered scriptural in a sense, but it gives us contextual understanding of what took place back in history.
Yeah, and honestly that's the thing about all Scripture
Data point.
and history is it's just data points. I mean, we did not live during that period of time. The best we have is what people wrote about it. So anything you can find is valid. The key is trying to identify what's true and hasn't been manipulated or obscured to serve somebody's purpose, right? I mean, because like there are changes between translations. People make translations to support their particular denomination, their particular beliefs, their particular religion. So I mean, like, it's complicated. It is not a simple thing that you can just read something and say unequivocally this is the truth. It's like, no, we have to study and work at this in order to get to the truth. And my having gone through so many iterations that I found out not to be true, and I don't fault people for this. Like, you and I, have been in the same ministry. I don't fault anybody for teaching error. It's like they're just doing the best they can with what they know. And it really boils down to we have to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves. It really comes down to how we treat each other, really. But getting to the truth of the matter of the thing is like this takes work. This is not a simple thing. It's like there's 40,000 denominations for a reason because people can't agree.
Yeah.
um,
Well, I mean, even in the word Antiochus, it's anti Oculus, ocular. He's against anti, and then Antiochus Epiphanes. So the word epiphany means to be manifest in the flesh. So he's like God in the flesh. Epiphaneros, upon phanero. Phanero means manifest, and so that's what his name actually means, is God in the flesh in a sense. And so it's his word, his actual original name was Mithridates. So that the cult that was prevalent back in that time, it has a lot of parallels, I guess, within the Christian theology is for Mithras. And so you've seen like Mithras slaying the bull, like the guy, he's wearing a little hat and then he's like on top of a bull, and it's
mhm.
a picture of the Mazroth in a sense. And so you got Taurus, and it shows the scorpion and stuff, some old figures. So, but I'd
Mhm.
encourage people to look that up, that kind of get that history on Antiochus Epiphanes.
Okay. Before we get too far away from this, I wanted to go back to your point about Rome and the seven mountains. Yesterday, I found this when I was reading in second Esdras. 11, the eagle which you saw coming up from the sea is the fourth kingdom, which appeared in a vision to your brother Daniel. So that's where this image comes from. And what I did is, so this is the fourth kingdom. So you've got the kingdom of gold, Babylon. You've got the chest of silver, which is Medo-Persia. The belly and the thighs of bronze, which was the Greece during that period of time. And then you get Rome. And what's interesting about Rome is is we're almost still living in this under Rome, because Rome became like a church. It became a religion. You have the Roman Catholic Church that came out of Rome, and it has had a profound effect on the entire world, even today in the United States. So this is something I was Googling. Is just like,
Can you make that image bigger?
Yeah, here, let me go back
Looks
here.
smaller.
Joop.
No, it's you're not sharing the full screen. I think it's
Let me go.
we're taking up the most of the screen.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, here you go. Here.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. So in Ezra, it says that the fourth kingdom, so it said here, the eagle which you saw coming up from the sea is the fourth kingdom. So I think most of us, there's a lot of people who have gone through Ezra and tried to understand this prophetic image. They try to associate it with the United States. I don't think it's explicitly associated with the United States. There's the wording in here is the broader picture seems to be Rome or the Roman Catholic Church. And that was the point I was trying to get back to with how you were talking about the seven mountains are associated with Rome, right? So I think we're still under that authority from a spiritual perspective, and it's the lion who comes in. The United States is a representation of the eagle, because that's what I do think that these feathers line up pretty. I mean, I don't have any other explanation for the way these feathers line up, because they do actually seem to line up with presidents. And it seems like this last one, who caused nothing but grief and tumult, was probably Biden, because then immediately after Biden, you have the lion coming in and rebuking the eagle. But my point is I think we're in this last portion. I mean, clearly, I mean, I don't think anybody actually denies this. We're within this part of the prophecy that Daniel gave. So we're down here in the feet, and we're about to get to the point to where the stone that was carved out of this without hands and smashes the final part that's made of iron and clay. We're in that period of time, but there's definitely a connection to Rome. And that's what you were saying, I think, with the seven mountains.
Yeah, I mean, I always say Rome never fell; it just rebranded. Just
yeah, exactly.
I mean, look at the United States. When you even look at the Senate building, it looks like just right out of Rome. We've got the Statue of Liberty is not actually a woman; it's actually the Sol Invictus. It's a man that looks like a woman. So there's your transgender and stuff. And so you go out to LA, you've got all the different gates of Egypt, and there's stuff all over this country that's very symbolic, even in the Washington Monument, which I think, is people say is a phallus or whatever, but maybe it's just a timepiece, a sundial. But we have all of this syncretized within our country, and even like people say the Freemasons and the layout of Washington D.C. and how everything's designed and stuff, and it's like we're not without. Like we talked about earlier, the dollar bill. You look on the dollar bill. What do you have? You've got the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, and you've got the eagle with 13 arrows and 13, a lot of 13 feathers and stuff like that. And so symbolism is all over. And I think Rome is, like I said, it's just faked its death, and now is called America.
Yeah.
Amarillo.
Well, this is when I was Googling it. This is one of the things that came up is the framers of the U.S. Constitution incorporated Roman ideas about the separation of power and the need for a Senate, which goes back to what we were talking about, separation of church and state. So there's definitely Roman influences on the United States. And then here's another one with the eagle. In 107 BC, Roman general Gaius Marius designated the eagle as the emblem of the Roman army. So, I mean, there's definitely connections to Rome still.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Deborah, to your point, regarding the Antichrist, so this is, I don't do a very good job communicating this, even though I bring it up constantly. I'm trying to find a better way to explain why people should stop using Antichrist so ambiguously. And the point with is in Daniel is the word Antichrist isn't used, but everybody uses that word there. I think it makes for better conversation if you say the prince who is to come that's mentioned in Daniel, because then I know exactly who you're referring to. And I think it's dangerous to make assumptions that just because things seem similar that they're identical. So there's this idea that people have built up that the Antichrist is this man who's against Christ, and it's a fiction. It's a fiction, because when you actually study the use of that word in the Bible, it has different attributes. So I like to speak clearly so that we know, so that we can communicate more properly, so that we can know what we're talking about.
Right.
It's because it's in making the assumptions that blinds people to, if you assume all these things are talking about the same thing, then you're going to end up missing when they happen, if they're meant to happen in the future.
Yeah, and I'll add too, just to close out on this. Anti can also mean replace, kind of like an anti-pasta, and so it's a replacement of the true Messiah. You can look at it from that view as give us a false image of a God man that got rid of the law. You have an antichrist, and so that spirit, like he says that there's many antichrist out there. There's that spirit of that deny that Yahushua was a man that came in the flesh, 100% flesh human being and stuff. And so that is an antichrist spirit, and so that spirit is throughout this empire that we call United States, or Rome rebirthed in a sense. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a big topic to dive in.
Yeah. It's a hard one to communicate considering the prevailing narrative, because there's a narrative that people are heavily invested in with end time events. Like, you've got the Left Behind series, you've got a lot of people who are doing research that are writing books on stuff, but they go at the research based on this narrative. It's just like you're starting with a lie and you're building up stories and research based on the lie. It's like you haven't gotten to the actual truth of the matter, which is why I'm so adamant to, like, let's speak correctly. If you're going to say Antichrist, please say spirit of Antichrist, because then you're actually speaking correctly. So, but I get the point. I mean, I understand what they're saying. I went through a period of time that I was really hardcore on this and really got after people and wouldn't even allow them. Now it's like, okay, I have to stop doing that, just because if you're going to progress in conversation, you just need to shut up and work with where people are at. So, yeah, man of lawlessness, son of perdition. That's another one. It's just like, I don't think I can see the connection with Antichrist, but there are other things to consider with that. So, right,
yeah, I'm not looking for an antichrist figure personally.
I mean, I get what they're saying. I mean, like in Revelation 13, it talks about two beasts, one from the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns, and then one from the earth with 2 horns. People who don't speak accurately will usually refer to all of Revelation 13 as the Antichrist, when it's just like, there's like 20 people talked about in there. Which one are you referring to?
Right. Well, I mean, it's the beast system is the Roman Catholic Church. The prophet is the Pope that presents. You can go through all the history of that, and it fits a lot with the RCC and the doctrines. The 3 frogged spirits, which are actually 3. It talks about three men, and you've got 666, which is the number for man. It's a trinity. It's there's a lot of symbolism within that. So,
yeah. Well, and the key to observing, and what I think is really going to reveal the true meaning of these things. Whoops. Where is it? Oh, I'm not sharing anything again. Hang on a minute. Let me share this. How are you doing on time? We're already over our hour.
All right, we got a few minutes. You want any more questions in the chat? Go over.
Yeah, we can. Let's do one more question. Can you see the chat? You want to pick one?
Or just comments. I don't know if I can bring anything up on the screen.
So this is my point in the paying attention and observing is if you just assume that Revelation 13 is referring to one person, you miss the details that give us more information about like this. So like based on this observation, it would appear that the beast of the sea rises during the next 3.5 years. And then something happens at the end of that period of time, which gives rise to the beast from the earth, which is going to dominate for the next 3.5 years. So that's kind of what I'm looking at is just like, by observing these things and not assuming that I know what I mean, but looking for or know what they mean, but by looking for the possible fulfillment of them, then that can inform, what's to come. Which is why basically what I'm always talking about is just like my expectation is, the next 3.5 years, even if the Bible calls it the tribulation, it may not be all that bad, right? Because you have the Church of Philadelphia has told they're kept from the trials coming on the whole world. So yeah, some people it's going to be really bad, and it's been really bad for quite a while. It's been really bad, but anyway. I'll stop talking about that. You find a good question?
No, I don't. I can't bring anything up. You can just grab something. Yeah, I don't know if there's questions or just a comment.
The end time is not so bad if you love Jesus. Amen.
Mark. Sir.
I don't want to do that question. That we'll be here for a while. I don't like to really talk about that one all that much, although it may become okay, well, let's just bring it up.
You did it now. Now I got to know.
We may be here for the rest of the night. All right, so here's so Jesus is Jesus God. So go Kart Bob says it all points to making the Messiah God. So I don't like talking about this because I don't think that by and large, so it's incredibly important to some people. To the people it's not important to, I don't think it's consequential. Does that make sense?
What does the Messiah say? What I mean, like honestly, what does he say?
He says that those
3:12. What does he say?
Okay, we'll do your thing. Revelation 3:12.
Revelation 3:12. Bring it up. Put it on the screen. I believe, I think a lot of when this kind of question is people are saying the same thing, but exactly. In different ways.
And that's why I don't like to really argue or debate about it unless people are, if somebody really wants to go at it with the word, I'm happy to defend my position. But most people just don't care. Really? Right?
Well, it's like, that's why I say, what is the Messiah? Like, I don't care about my opinion, your pastor's opinion, what the church teaches. What does the Messiah say himself in Revelation 3:12? And not just here, but all over. And like this, there's no topic that I have studied and examined more myself personally than this. Cause I'm like, man, if you don't get this right, then maybe that is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand where people come from because, I've been in it, but I've asked the questions, I personally am like, so if I'm wrong, if say he's not, and I say I believe that he's not, and I'm wrong, but I still believe in one creator, Elohim, and I believe that the Messiah, Jesus, is his son, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I believe, regardless if I believe him being God. But if I'm wrong in reverse, I have replaced Elohim with something else. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, which way would I prefer to be wrong? But I don't think it comes down to that because I understand how the scriptures are written and how that he is the image of Elohim in the flesh. But he's not Elohim himself, because Elohim is spirit. And even he says that in John 4:24. He says Elohim is spirit. And the Messiah's talking to Peter. He says, "Who do you say I am?" He says, "You're the son of Elohim." And he said, "Well, you had to get revelation to know that I am the son. You didn't get revelation to know that I'm God. You got revelation to know that I am the son of Elohim."
Yeah.
And the man in the flesh looks up to heaven and he says, "Father, thou art in heaven," right? He's not here on earth talking to you. He's up there in heaven. And you can, I can argue against that myself personally. Like, well, Yah is everywhere. He's in present. He's in all of us. He's in us, and we are in the flesh. So in that technicality, we are God in the flesh, right?
So yeah, so
God,
when I think about this, I think about the two churches that have nothing to repent from, right? So Jesus gave us an example of the groups of people who have things to repent from and the groups of people who have nothing to repent from. And the two that have nothing to repent from are Smyrna and Philadelphia, the church that's under crushing pressure and the church of brotherly love, which I think harmonizes with love God and love your neighbor. So to my point is I think that there are people who will use the terminology Jesus is God who Jesus doesn't take offense against if he's not God, right? Because I think what's more important is that you love God and love your neighbor. But then if you really want to get into doctrinal issues, that's where you get into the church of like Pergamos and Thyatira, to where he tells them to repent of their doctrinal issues. They eat things that are sacrificed to idols. They worship Baal. They have doctrinal issues. So it's just like if you want to get into the accuracy of the word, then that probably puts you into one of those areas if you want to fight about it. And that's where it's just like I'll have the debates if you want to, and if you can prove me wrong, I'll believe what you say. But I have yet to have anybody actually convince me against where I currently stand. And
right. Well, that's
I've tried a
why
lot.
I highlight, what does the Messiah say? And clearly here in Revelation 3:12, he says, "He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God."
Right.
So right there, that should be a real eye opener for anyone that he himself claims he has a God. And then I know it's like, oh, well, you don't understand the Trinity. I was like, no, I understand it very, very well. And
Yeah.
he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God. 4 times he says, he professes that he has a God. And then later on in the book, we see him going to receive the scroll from his God.
Yeah.
So there's the confusion is within the language, within the translation, and within the understanding of the entire scope of the book from front to back. But that's what I said earlier. It's like having, understanding that he is a human being 100% from the seed of Joseph, from the line of David. He was made a son of God. The son of God is a spiritual birth. It's not a physical birth. We are
Mhm.
all physically born by our parents. Spiritually, we are sons of God's through a spiritual birth. Same with seed of serpent. It's not physical, it's spiritual in a sense. So it's physical and spiritual are not the same thing. And so in order
Right.
to
And one
be
of
a
the
human being, you have to be born from a man. And in order to be a, spirit being, you have to be born from the spirit.
Right, and one of the arguments that the Trinitarians like to use is when Jesus said, "I and my Father are one." Well, if you go from that spiritual perspective to where if God is dwelling in us, I can rightfully say, "I and my Father are one," because I
We are.
believe God is
He
my
says
Father.
that.
So
And
does that make me God in the same way that people are claiming Jesus said that he and his Father are one?
right.
So we're equal in that regards. That's not sufficient evidence to say that Jesus is the creator of the heavens and the earth just because he says he is one with the Father. Because I believe I'm the temple of God. I believe God dwells within me. I and my Father are one.
You're God in the flesh. You
There I
have
am,
God.
God in the flesh. Yeah.
Well, that's what he prays. He says, I pray, Father, that they will be one as you and I are one." And so
Exactly.
that's the intent, is like, the purpose is to be one, to be united in that faith. And like the Messiah shows us the walk. And we could probably do a whole episode on that topic. Probably not
Oh
good
yeah.
to dive into that. Be good to do like a whole, because like I know every single verse that everyone comes
Yep.
up against. I'm sure you do too, and
Yep.
I've got a video on every single one of them. And um, but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
deep topic, and understandably, it's very sensitive too for people that believe that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but thanks for the
Yeah.
question comment.
Well, and one thing I wanted to also point out here is the 144,000. So in Revelation 14, it says, "Then I looked, and behold, a lamb, which I believe is Yeshua, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads." Whose name is that? I don't think that's Yeshua. I think it's probably Yah or Yahweh, his father's name, right?
Well, it's
It's not his
in the
name.
context of the family name.
Yeah.
That's what it talks about. Like, I come in His name.
Hmm.
It's we when we become born again, we become a part of the family. We inherit that family name. So it's
Yeah.
at not at that name or in that name, every knee shall bow. The word "at's" not actually in there. It's in the name, the family name, which was given to him. He gives it to us. So now we're a part of the family, and all knees shall bow in the name, the family name, the Yahuwah's name. And so he
Yeah.
says, wherever I go, wherever my people are, I place my name there. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to count this as sin one way or the other. So if one of us is right and one of us is wrong, I think if you want to be in the Church of Philadelphia, you just love each other regardless, right? Let's keep moving forward. Let's love God and love our neighbor as ourselves. But if this is something that you're pushing people away from, and you're counting them as evil, and you're marking them as, though they are, in league with Satan, then you might want to, make sure that you're right. And if you're gonna push to that degree, and that's why there's 40,000 denominations, is people have opinions and they believe to the death in their particular opinions. So
right.
as for me, I'd rather be in the school with nothing to repent from and just love everybody. I'm not going to push you away because of your belief.
Well,
Unless
and
you
that's
try and
another.
kill me, then I'm going to defend myself.
That's another big one is the I am. When you read John 8:58 out of context, if you just back up a couple verse, he says, Abraham was glad to see my day. And
Hmm.
he's just saying, I am he whose day he was glad to see, because even at the end of John, it talks about these things were written so that you might believe he is the son of Elohim, not that he is Elohim. And so the Messiah is not professing, he wouldn't say, my God, my God, my God in this book. And then over here, he's saying, I am God, I am God, I am God. He says, no,
Yeah.
worship God only. Don't worship me. Why call me good? So when he's saying I am, he's not, that's actually about Abraham. The I am was a reference to Moses, not Abraham. So he's saying Abraham was glad to see my day, and I am he whose day he saw. And that's where one of
Didn't you
those
do a
Greek.
video on this?
Yeah, I've got a video on that. You can see, I think in like John chapter 5, all they add it's the same exact Greek phrase, but they left out the he in John 8:58, whereas in other translate or the other verses they applied the he, which would have been appropriately applied in that
Hmm.
context. But it's really just understanding the context, backing up a couple verses. He's like, yeah, that's me. I am he. I'm the Messiah. I'm the one, the promised seed who Abraham was wanting to see. I'm here,
Yeah.
guys. Look at me.
Yeah, my encouragement is most people is so I have done the work. I listen quite regularly to people who teach the Trinity, constantly checking myself and verifying, the foundation of the things that I believe. I would encourage anybody who wants to argue this subject to spend time with the people who have researched it. There's a lot of people who were raised believing the Trinity, who through their own research have come to other conclusions. There's Bill Schlegel, there's Dale Tuggy, there's a guy who has a channel called the Trinity Delusion. Spend some time with these guys and look at their reasoning. How they were raised one way, and when they went to go prove it for themselves, they came to a different conclusion. So that's
Or
my
go to
encouragement for
Yasplane.
people. Or go to Yasplane. Yasplane has a lot of videos on these too.
I
That
got a
that
lot of
one on
videos
the
on that topic.
Abraham that was
Yeah.
learning for me. I had never heard that before. That was an amazing video. That definitely, matter of fact, I'll put that one in the description, because I think that one is good, and it's not common knowledge. It's not a
Yeah.
common understanding of that. So
Right on.
cool.
All right.
Yeah. Well, cool.
So that was I think that's all the big stories. I haven't seen anything else happening
Yeah, Trump is
as of
in North
late.
Carolina. I think, right now.
Oh, he's in
So,
North Carolina. Is what's he doing there? Handing
so
out
he's
700 bucks.
yeah, no, he's put a pause on all foreign aid so that he can focus on our citizens. I am
Oh,
absolutely floored
imagine that.
that the previous administration couldn't even do, like, the $700 thing is a joke. Like, you're not kidding. Like, that's just
That's
the
an
dumbest
insult.
thing
Yeah.
I've ever heard of. Like, they're giving hundreds of billions of dollars to other people, and they can't even take care of the people they're responsible for. It's just like, that's just common sense. So the fact that he did that, I was like cheering. We were literally, me and my wife were cheering on our couch, going, "Yeah, like common sense is reigning again."
Yeah. It's a return of sanity, hopefully.
Yeah, he also put a blackout on external communications from health agencies. So CDC, NIH, stuff like that. They're blocked from changing their websites, doing some. I don't think they can destroy any documents, and they're blocked from communicating externally. I can imagine that there's probably investigations going on in regards to that. So it's a good day to be alive. It's nice to see justice reign.
Did they ever release all the J6 folks, or is that still
No, that's a
underway?
good
Or
question. I don't know. That's a really good question. Last I
yeah, they
heard, they'd
were.
only released 4.
I thought I saw like a couple of interviews of people had been released, but I didn't know if all of them had been let out. And I imagine that would take. There's a bit of time and processing. 1,500 people. It's not
Yeah.
just an overnight thing.
Yeah, my understanding is the reason they didn't release them immediately is there was a wording issue in the pardon that they had to fix. So I haven't followed up on that to see if it was fixed or not. I imagine it was, but I don't know for sure. Yeah. Well, cool, man. That was great. What a good day. Thanks for coming on with me and talking about this stuff. I
Yes,
enjoy
sir.
this. I live for this. This is what I enjoy doing.
Yeah, it's good to see from you, hear from you, see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the questions, everybody. Yeah, I think we should get some more questions, save some time for that, and it's good to have some discussions.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, God bless everybody. Shalom, shalom. Until next
All
time.
right,
Take care.
enjoy your weekend. Don't get too weekend.
Don't get yet because your weekends. Enjoy your weekend.